Hey everybody, how's it going? So, if you have observation haki, you can pretty much use it to predict that the fan debate revolving around the Luffy versus Katakuri fight is about to get a lot more intense, a lot more heated after this chapter. But before I get into that, let's talk about the cover page. So apparently there's been this ongoing animosity, this ongoing conflict between the long legs and the long arms that dates apparently to about 1,000 years ago, because it says a 1,000-year-old conflict. So it's crazy because, if you know, the Void Century dates back to about, I think it's like 900 years in the past. So this conflict is even older than that. So I wonder if the long arm and long leg tribe elders know anything about the Void Century that they would care to discuss with us at some point in the future. However, I think it's a nice touch that Oda has decided to introduce this conflict, because Oda loves resolving political conflicts in his story. So I can only see this conflict getting resolved harmoniously, especially because you have Ideo, who is a long arm, and you have Blue Gilly, who is a long leg. And if they see that they're working together, that might send the right message, and then they could just, just stop having this conflict. And eventually, maybe the tribes can start breeding with each other, and you'll have like long arm, long leg humans, and that's how the conflict will get resolved, thanks to somebody who's a member of the Straw Hat Pirate Fleet. So I'm definitely waiting for that Smoothie and Apu hybrid child. So I'm gonna start with the ending for this video. Apparently Praline, or Praline, whatever you want to call her, has this very charming voice, and she's using it to distract the sea slugs to stop them from reporting any ships cruising through Totland. So Praline is kind of helping the Straw Hats there, and although we do not know how far away they are from the events that are happening right now in Totland, I'm willing to say that they can't be that far. Like, they're probably like near the outskirts. If you look closely in that final panel, we also see Aladdin, which in a way kind of explains why Praline is doing this in the first place. It's because she's married to Aladdin, and Aladdin has served under Jinbei, and Jinbei wants to serve under Luffy, so, they're helping each other out. They got each other's back, Praline taking away the sea slugs. If you look closely, actually, further into the panel, you'll see some very small silhouettes of other fishmen. So it could be possible that the rest of the Sun Pirate crew is still around, readily available to try and help even more. I like how Pound is saying that he wants to get into the cake factory because he wants to see Chiffon, who is his daughter, and he remembers her very, very fondly, being extremely cute, and yet we see this bubble of him thinking about the day they were born, Lola and Chiffon, and those babies look pretty repulsive, I'm not gonna lie. Now, if you remember a couple of videos back, I said that the reason for why either Pudding or Sanji was saying, please don't let anybody inside of the factory, is because somebody indeed was going to go and force themselves into the factory. And looky who we have here marching down the street like he owns the place. None other than Minister Oven. So he beats up Mr. Pound, and it's pretty obvious at this point that something's going to go wrong within the factory, such as like maybe the oven's not working or malfunctioning, and then I think this is pretty clear that it's setting up a Sanji versus Oven confrontation. Maybe Brûlé, since there's a Dendemushi belonging to Brûlé inside of the factory, she can be like, wait, I heard something weird. Oven, go check it out. Get into that factory.
Oven, that Sanji boy is with them. Get in there.
Because in this chapter, Oven actually says, well, I'm not going to go into the factory because I respect my sister's wishes. But technically speaking, Brûlé is also Oven's sister. So if he follows Brûlé's orders, then it's like, I mean, I'm also respecting my sister's wish of, investigating the situation. Stupid Brûlé, though, like, she's just spilling the beans and pretty much making Sanji aware of what the plan is to ambush the Straw Hats in Cacao Island. So it's just like, it's like this standard narrative, like, villain explaining the plan so that it can go wrong by the end. But anyway, if nothing else, this chapter definitely confirmed a Sanji versus Oven matchup, or at the very least, at the very minimum, Sanji is definitely going to be using Oven's heat ability to bake the cake at some point. It just has to happen. There's no point of like, hey, I'm a guy with like, heat abilities. Like I can heat myself up, and then it's like, well, I'm baking a cake. Do something with that and help me out. But because, it's a shonen manga, you need some action, so Sanji's probably going to force Oven to help him by trying to land a couple of hits on him before that. Maybe every time Sanji lands a hit with Diablo Jamba or a new technique, hopefully a new mode, Oven just gets hotter and hotter, and that's how he ends up baking the cake. Personally, I would have wanted Daifuku to show up. In fact, maybe he can still show up and then it'll be a 2v1 and that's what forces Sanji to activate a new mode. That would be great. That would be really cool. I'm still hoping on Daifuku, but no word of him yet. Also, Smoothie has been noticeably absent. But now that I think about it, and based off of the cover page that we got today, maybe Oda is deliberately saving Smoothie to have a more important role later down the road, where this long arm, long leg tribe conflict gets resolved. And since she's a long leg, maybe she'll have a role to play there. The same thing goes for Tamago, since technically he is also a long leg. Sanji also makes a reference in this chapter to a legendary character, alright? And that is the L train coming into Katakuri Station. Because once again, we have another Charlotte family member hyping Katakuri up, as they should. But Sanji be taking none of that, because he's up against his captain, so he says, "Listen up, sugar plums. Today will mark that man's first L." So I really appreciated that moment in specific, because I think it's Oda's way of letting us know that Sanji's faith in Luffy has returned back to normal, which is something that was kind of wobbly, a little bit turbulent, especially during the middle part of this arc. But anyway, despite that, I have to say that I really do feel for Katakuri, especially during the beginning parts of this chapter. There's this one scene where Luffy, like Gear 4 Luffy, lands a Rhino Schneider, and oh my god, he hits the back of his head, and you see him, like you see his head literally bounce off of the floor because of the hit. That was so bad. I mean, that was hard to watch. It was hard to read. It reminded me of that scene in Spider-Man where Emma Stone's character just kind of falls to her death because the back of her head hits the floor, and you just hear this little crack, but it's more of like a, and you're like, crap. If Katakuri were a normal human being, like this is what would have happened to him. So page 9 of Manga Stream was definitely a hard one to witness. Now, I have to be honest and say that I'm just a little bit disappointed that a Kong gun was able to do that much to Katakuri, even with the block Mochi activated. Granted, alright, and again, respect to Oda, it definitely did not do nearly as much as it did to Cracker, and it definitely didn't do nearly as much as it did to Dofi. So if you scale upward, it makes perfect sense. But Katakuri still was sent flying through a building. But thankfully, and I think mainly in part due to the Block Mochi, this new level of Armament Haki, Katakuri is able to come to a halt and stop himself. So the impact, after he goes through the building, he's able to stop himself. Regardless though, Luffy is capable of landing 3 consecutive Gear 4th hits on Katakuri, and that is not good. I don't care who you are, that is not good. Leaves Katakuri bleeding by the end. We don't know yet if Katakuri has some type of sort of regenerative type of healing ability like Dofi had. You know, if Dofi could stitch up his organs and stuff. Hopefully Katakuri has something like that. But yeah, man, it was really hard to watch. And then there's this one part where, like Luffy says, like even with your new type of armament Haki, this hardening that you have that's stronger than normal, I can still bypass it with Gear 4th. This is the moment where I think it would have been better if Luffy had explained himself a little bit more, because if you make the logical connection, then if Gear 4th is able to just completely overwhelm the Block Mochi, doesn't that mean that Luffy has also reached that level of armament Haki that is above normal? Wouldn't that be the case, right? If you could overwhelm like Block Mochi, which Katakuri implied last week, there are levels to Armament Haki, and this is a level above the normal. So I have a question. Do you think, based on this chapter, do you think that Gear 4th is capable of overwhelming, bypassing the Block Mochi, or is Luffy's Gear 4th hit, alright, forcing Katakuri to smash himself with his own Block Mochi arms? And that's what's really dealing in the damage. Because then Katakuri comes in with a counter, and he uses his Awakening plus his Armament Haki with the Strength Mochi attack, and you could just look at Luffy's Gear 4th face. His eyes blank out, they go white from the attack. He sends him flying, crashing and bouncing off a wall. Now the thing here is that Oda is pretty much saying that it's better not to underestimate any of these two fighters, right? We saw what Luffy did in the beginning, the amount of damage he was able to deal against Katakuri. Now Katakuri's coming back with a counter, and it seems like he has the upper hand, but just do not underestimate Luffy over Katakuri or Katakuri over Luffy. Because this is going to be a very, very, very close fight. I can already tell, just based off of this chapter alone. Now, because of this, because it's a 1v1, people naturally pick sides, right? And the thing here is that people have already begun bringing up the argument, and this conversation I think started a couple chapters back, but it's become more and more prevalent, where in which people feel like Oda is intentionally nerfing Katakuri. The thing here is that, as far as I understand, the concept of nerf, when you nerf something or somebody, it means that you don't have them at 100%. You don't have the character be as powerful as they normally would be by having some type of a detriment that doesn't really allow their full power to come forth. And as far as I've read the fight, I haven't seen any of that happen. It's just that Oda's just gradually introducing these weaknesses to Katakuri that we just didn't know existed before. So it's just like, oh, okay, well, there's a weakness, well, here's Luffy to exploit that weakness. So apparently you need to be calm in order to use your observation haki to its full extent. I mean, I don't know how crappy your observation haki is if you're not calm, but it seems to go, like, the advantage of it seems to go down significantly if you're just hot-headed, as Katakuri mentioned in this chapter. I kind of wish, though, that Rayleigh would have mentioned something like that to Luffy back when he was teaching him about haki. Be like, by the way, in order to use observation haki, remain calm. Because see, the problem is that if you don't foreshadow these things ahead of time, you're pretty much leaving yourself open as an author for people to complain and say, wow, these weaknesses are literally being pulled out of your ass. But fortunately, that's not the case, because I remember Oda giving us at least 2 examples. Let me know if you know of any other examples. But he's given us examples of moments where in which people that have observation haki, right, because they're focused on something else, all right, or they may not be as calm as they should be, they don't sense what's around them. I remember in Zou, there's this tree, right, and Luffy is like at the base of the tree, and he was like having this fight with a bull and a gorilla, and then later it turns out that on the branches of that tree, like Pedro was there, and there was also a lot of minks there, and Luffy had not even sensed them because he was focused. He wasn't calm, I guess. He wasn't like really mindful about the tree and what could possibly be on the tree. The second example, and I love this one because it also foreshadows what happens in this chapter when Luffy sort of tells Katakuri what the weakness is here or what his advantage is. So what Katakuri does is basically illustrated by Aokiji back in Marineford. Granted, Aokiji is a Logia and Katakuri is a Paramecia, but essentially what Aokiji does in Marineford is that he uses his observation haki to dodge Whitebeard's spear. Aokiji at this point knows that Whitebeard's spear is embedded with haki on it, so what he ends up doing is that he opens up a gap, a hole within himself to let the spear just pass right through him, which is exactly what Katakuri has been doing in his fight against Luffy, because by using his future sight ability, he can pretty much see where Luffy's punches are going to land and open holes in those areas before those punches even reach him. Now, does that mean that Aokiji and the rest of the admirals also have that same level of observation haki where in which they can see future events before they happen? We don't know. I mean, I guess it's implied, but we don't know yet. That is still yet to be confirmed. But what we do know, and this also serves to illustrate what Katakuri was saying, is that right in this moment, Aokiji is busy dealing with Whitebeard, and obviously he's under a lot of stress because, I mean, he has a spear like going right through him. He doesn't focus his observation haki, and guess what happens? Jozu comes in from the side, and he punches him, and he actually lands a hit. Boom. Aokiji starts bleeding. So Jozu does end up dealing some damage to him because Aokiji was not calm enough to use his observation haki to sense Jozu coming. Basically, that's it for me, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Overall, I thought the chapter was good. I really appreciate everything you do to help the channel out. I really do. I know it just kind of seems like I'm repeating myself at the end of each video, but I really do mean it. Whether it's commenting, subscribing, or leaving a thumbs up, or maybe even doing all 3, I really appreciate that. So thanks a bunch, and I'll catch you guys later. Bye.